Mrs. Sujata Godbole ji, Sanjay Nahar ji, Madam Meera Godbole ji, Air Marshal Gokhale ji, हमारे सूरज साहब, and all other guests who have come here, and the students, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first thank Mr. Nahar, Sanjay Nahar of Sarhad, for having invited me to do this first inaugural lecture in the memory of late Madhav Godbole ji. I must also thank all of you who have come to listen to this lecture. As I was telling Mrs. Godbole and Meera Godbole ji in the small room that we met, that I had the first and the last contact interaction with late Madhav Godbole ji way back in 1997, when he had been made the chairman of a state government committee, a state level committee, which had members from within the state as well as from some outside the state also, to recommend measures for improving administration in Jammu and Kashmir. And this was 97. For 6 years, between 90 and 96, J&K was under first 6 months governor's rule and then the president's rule for nearly 6 months, central rule. And it was in 96 that the first elections were held after 6 long years. So we had a major backlog, and you all know why we didn't have a representative government for 6 years, because of the onset of militancy in Kashmir, in Jammu and Kashmir in 1990. And the administration had really, crumbled for the first 2-3 years, and particularly in the valley. And then the local administration, as Sanjay ji was just mentioning, that it wasn't easy for the local administration, for the state level administration to revive and rebuild the administration, because it had really, because of the preponderance of the number of militants in the valley and in parts of Jammu division, it had become very difficult to function. It had become very difficult to administer, to govern. But that took about 2-3 years, and then 3 years later, things started improving. Ultimately, the Government of India decided, the Election Commission of India decided, that we can now have elections in 96, when Dr. Farooq Abdullah was returned to power as the Chief Minister. And it was his government that constituted this committee headed by Mr. Godbole. I was Secretary Food Supplies and Transport, and I had the good fortune of sitting in a meeting with him and getting to know how passionate he was about good governance. After that, life went on, and I'm sure that committee made certain recommendations about one of my areas of interest. It was part of my jurisdiction, that was the State Road Transport Corporation, the reforms within the public sector. And I was, because my department was dealing with the State Roadways Transport Corporation, I vividly remember the discussion we had during that particular interaction. And he had a lot of suggestions how to improve the working of the State Road Transport Corporation. After that, years went on, and I as some of my friends have said that, I have been a student of governance in IAS. You're supposed to know what administration is all about and how administration can be better. So, which is what good governance is all about. Then I saw the book by late Madhav Godbole. It came in 2014. Good governance, never on India's radar. It's a blue book. It's in my bag. I'm sure definitely he was, because I have bought this book about 5 years back, or when it came in 2014, and I must have purchased it in Delhi in Khan Market, and because I also retired around 2015, and I felt that now I'll be called upon to speak on good governance, and I must pick up this book and actually get to know what good governance is all about, so that I'm able to speak about good governance. It's a very masterful book, and I think I have not read all other books of his. I have just seen another book, again on governance. Uh, not, I believe he has written 20 books. And Mr. Vora was telling me yesterday that he had the time to write about a couple of, more than a dozen books, maybe 20. So, but I haven't read all. I have read these two books on governance. In this, he, is not trying, he actually wants to define governance, good governance. And he has picked up, he tells the reader, the UNDP definition, the World Bank definition, the OECD definitions, which essentially are, this is the UNDP definition talks about. I am finding it difficult to read because of lack of glasses. But this is the one. The main elements of good governance are corruption-free administration, accountability. Okay, I'll try. Accountability of those. Yeah. The main elements are corruption-free administration, accountability of those working in the administration, transparency in decision making, which means that the record of administration must be accessible. This is what Mr. Madhav Godbole has written in his book. Of course, he quotes UNDP, and the records must be accessible, which means transparency, for public scrutiny in the nature of, which is what the RTI is all about these days, but it's more than RTI. The rule of law and equality before law and equal protection of law, sensitivity to people's grievances and feelings, participative governance, predictability in decision making, responsiveness to citizens' needs and citizens' friendliness. This is what almost nothing is left behind. I mean, if all this is there in the administration, it's automatically good governance. And then he says, in second chapter, he says, the governance governance not only needs to be good, but it also needs to be inclusive. There must be respect for human rights. There must be right to information. There must be right to privacy. And there must be right to employment, right to education, right to housing. This is all in the nature of the developmental administration that we talk about. And governance needs to be more inclusive, taking care of poorer sections of society, poverty alleviation, income generation. It must provide food, water, health. Everything must be taken care of. So, for him, the good governance was just not the good part of it, that transparency, accountability, responsiveness. It was also inclusive. That means he had the poorer sections of people, the marginalized people in his mind. And he wanted administration and governance to be good for all sections of society, and particularly the poorer sections of society and the marginalized sections of society, the minorities. And in his own book, the blue book, that this is the book that good governance never on India's radar. Now things have changed. I think we must now acknowledge, because this was written in 2014, and since then, the good governance is now being given due importance, more importance, I believe, in the governments that have followed. And he writes at the end of that, the back page of that blue book says, these are his own words. In the words of Madhav Godbole, India is clearly divided into two worlds. The much touted shining India, signifying the glossy, superficial, highly westernized sections of society with the extravagant lifestyles, and the left, this is India, and the left behind India, or Bharat, which consists of the poor, deprived, malnourished, underfed, neglected, and marginalized sections of society, residing largely in rural areas and in slums and in hutments in urban areas. There is an ever widening gap between these two Indias, and that is what needs to be bridged. These are the words of late Madhav Godbole himself, his own language, and shows that how concerned he was about governance, that it is not only to be good, it is not only to be corruption free, it is not only to be accountable, it is not only to be transparent, it has also to be inclusive. And it must be inclusive by including the beneficiaries. Among the beneficiaries, the most important beneficiaries must be the poor and the marginalized sections of society. He is also concerned about how rest of the world sees India in terms of governance. And he talks about the rankings. When the outside agencies rank India, how do they rank India as far as governance is concerned? He says that we are often behind many countries, including China. For example, he picks up China, and he says that except in indices of freedom of speech, expression, freedom of speech and expression, and democracy, because China is very strict on these two. It doesn't have much of democracy, I believe, and maybe even freedom of speech is curbed. He says, except these two parameters where we score over China, but the parameters which relate to effectiveness of governance, India is behind China. And now this ranking thing, I would like to add here, this is not from the book, but recently, but this ranking is, we often find that we have a issue with the ranking agencies, because of late also you might have read in the press, even yesterday, Smriti Irani contested, Madam Smriti Irani, the Honorable Minister, contested this hunger index, because India, as whichever agency has done that ranking, has placed India at a certain level where it appears that there is high incidence of hunger in this country. And the minister has contested that. And we often contest, saying that the methodology which the ranking or the grading agencies follow in grading a country is not always correct, or we don't agree, or they don't take all the parameters into account. Their study is not so realistic as far as our field situations is concerned. So she was contesting it very hotly, very strongly. Similarly, you must have read about this the US agency, which grades or ranks countries as far as the religious freedoms are concerned. And again, in that, somehow our government and our people here, we were not happy with the ranking that the US agency has given us. And it was no less than a person like the External Affairs Minister who had to say that we don't agree with the methodology with which the US agency, the US government agency or religious freedoms, or believe, I'm not so familiar, maybe of the Senate or Congress, whatever, the way they have ranked India and given us a not an appropriate ranking. But nevertheless, this was because late Madhav Godbole was also very conscious of the fact, as I told you, how the world views India. And he has talked about it in detail in his books. I'm still in the first book. Then he also talks about, he is lamenting our deviation from constitutional provisions and the spirit of the Constitution. This was very dear to his heart. He thought that India has a great constitution. It's one of the best constitutions. There is almost nothing which the Constitution has left behind. So, if we follow the Constitution, if we as a society, as a government first, follow our own Constitution rigorously and follow in the right spirit of the Constitution, with which, in the spirit in which it was formulated, written, then we shall be a great country. And in this, he thinks that we have not been so rigorous, and there have been deviations. And he also thinks that in this, the judiciary, the highest judiciary, has not always acquitted itself gloriously. And this is despite judicial activism and the PILs. You could feel the passion, his feeling when he was in his books, in his writings, how serious he was about good governance and about following the Constitution in its real spirit. That was the man. He was an extraordinary man, a different man. Most of us in administration, we make compromises. And we think that administration is all about compromises or, doing the balancing act. It may not be so in the armed forces, where you have your sticklers to the rules and you follow everything. You go by the book, you go by the rule book, and there is hardly any scope for any kind of deviation. Administration, and civil administration in particular, is quite often doing the balancing act. And in doing the balancing act, sometimes you do deviate from the rule book, or from, I would say strictly from the Constitution, not from the kind of letter of Constitution, but maybe the spirit of the Constitution. Because letter of the Constitution will be illegal, will be a violation. In the third chapter of his book, it's a wonderful titles, The Ever Increasing Governance Deficit. That is the chapter third. And the author is concerned about communal and ethnic violence. Now this is, pre-2014 period. We have had relative peace after 2014. But he's talking about, and he's not talking about just few years before 2014. He's actually writing the history of governance in this country, and therefore he's talking behind, back a few decades also in certain cases. Because when he's talking about corruption, he has discussed how it was during Nehru's time, what was the attitude of the government during Nehru's time towards corruption, how it happened, what happened during successive regimes, successive prime ministers. And he is quite appreciative of the present Prime Minister. He says that he's personally extremely scrupulously honest. He has praised the Prime Minister. Anyway, so here in this chapter, he talks about communal and ethnic violence. He talks about center-state relations and misuse of Article 356. Now, this is all part of good governance. Basically, he says that if why do we have communal and ethnic violence? It's not a good sign. It's not part of our good governance that we are seeking in this country. Or for that matter, the center should not kind of boss over the states, because we have a federal structure and every state has a right to express itself and to administer the way the constitution allows it to administer. But if there is interference, or for that matter, if the center uses certain provisions of the constitution in a colored way, that is what upsets late Madhav Godbole, and he doesn't think that it is part of it is good governance. It is a constitutional governance. Nowadays, we hear that agencies are kind of, we don't hear of 356, Article 356, which empowers the center to impose president's rule. But we hear of other things like using agencies and all that against the opposition governments. But anyway, that he has not talked about, because this is 2014 book. Then he thinks that declaration of internal emergency by Mrs. Gandhi in 1975 was again a systemic failure, and thinks that the institutions it's a collapse of institutions. Neither the bureaucracy nor the judiciary could prevent internal emergency, which he thinks that it could have been prevented if the bureaucracy had acted strongly, if the judiciary had acted strongly, it could have been prevented. And he is quite unhappy about it, that there was internal emergency in 1975. And even the president could have prevented it. The president need not have signed the emergency, declaration of emergency. I mean, of course, the constitution says that the president has to go by what the Council of Ministers advises. So the minister, though theoretically or technically or by, we may not be able to blame the president, but it is generally said that everyone acquiesced, and so that could have been prevented. And this internal emergency of 1975 is unanimous. Almost there is a consensus about it all in the country that it was not such a good thing. It was not a good thing at all. It could have been prevented if the institutions had worked strongly, had asserted themselves. Then he talks about the nexus between criminals, bureaucrats, and politicians. And he is quite upset about scandals like, as I was telling you, he's not only talking about the recent times, he's talking about the old times also. Scandals like Hawala, Bofors, Jharkhand Mukti Morcha, Enron case, I believe he has dealt with that when he was in Maharashtra. Demolition of Babri Masjid, deterioration in the standards of civil services, road and rail safety, increasing clout of corporates and government, dismal performance of regulatory bodies. These are the points that he talks about, as governance deficit, ever increasing governance deficit. In this chapter, in the third chapter, he is talking about this. Then about the institutions, he is trying to answer this question, whether it's the institutions provided by the Constitution that have failed, or the men who work these institutions that have failed. And this is an ongoing debate, ongoing discussion. This was, even when Madhav Godbole Sahab had not written about it, this was always the discussion, that who is important, or who is determining the institutions or the men who handle the institutions. In this, I have an example. I personally think that the men who handle the institutions, men who are working the institutions, they are, if something goes wrong, it's not so much the institutions which are bad, which are wrong, it is the men who are working those institutions. The same, you take the example of T.N. Seshan. We had chief election commissioners before him, we had chief election commissioners after him. And I'm not saying that they were not good enough, or that our election commission has not been fair. That's been generally fair. Our elections have been generally very fair. But T.N. Seshan was of a different material. And for the first time, we were in the administration at that time, we felt that this election commission has so much of power that we didn't know that it has so much of power. Because now we felt in the field, we felt that we cannot so violate the directions or the instructions of the election commission. Before that, of election commission as Mr. T.N. Seshan when he became the chief election commissioner. But about the same T.N. Seshan, I would like to make a point which is, I have no proof in that, but it is said when he was cabinet secretary, he was more accommodative when he was cabinet secretary. And when he became chief election commissioner, he was tough because there he had all the power. He was a constitutional authority. He was not reporting to anybody. And he said, I am not reporting to anybody if my boss is the Constitution of India. But as the cabinet secretary, it is said that Mr. Rajiv Gandhi was the prime minister, and it is said that Mr. T.N. Seshan was, striking a balancing act or being more accommodative. So it's the person, it's often the men when they handle responsibilities, are heading institutions, and the way they work the institutions, it is, I think, that. Then the fourth chapter is about any evidence of good governance, discusses 6 concerns. Here the late Mr. Madhav Godbole, I think, does not see much evidence of good governance. I wish he had been living today, and he would have possibly talked so much about the digitalization that is going on and so much of reduction in corruption. It is said that in the central government there is hardly any corruption, and at least there are no scandals. But that was not so in the successive, in many regimes. So, but anyway, in any evidence of good governance, he discusses 6 areas of concern, which he himself, in the introduction, he says, I am going to discuss 6 areas of good governance. They are again corruption, secularism, making elections more representative. 3, illegal migration from Bangladesh. He's picked up that. 4, mounting areas of court cases. He has discussed it on a number of occasions in his books. And he talks about Article 31B. It seems that, there was some, I'm not too clear on this, but it seems that there was some reduction in the freedom of speech and expression through Article 31B. And in this he discusses how corruption was there during the earlier regimes immediately after 47, and how our approach to the government's approach to handling corruption or making corruption a costly affair, a costly mistake, was that was not done. It should have been made, corruption should have been made prohibitively expensive, prohibitively costly for those who are indulging in corruption. So he thinks that there had been some kind of what is called soft peddling on corruption during the initial 20-30 years of post-independence government, and possibly because at that time the government, the central government particularly, because he's mainly talking about the central, but even the state governments, they were they were trying to re-establish India, the free India, and they were trying to take everyone along. They did not want to get stuck in scandals and scams and looking into every bit of corruption. I think that he says he kind of thinks that could be one of the reasons, because he quotes Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru a couple of times on a couple of occasions where he says, even in Parliament, Pandit Nehru has said that we cannot be wasting our time every time and doubting every decision, talking about every small issue of corruption, and then missing the big picture. Because the big picture is to make India great, to develop India, to develop the poor people of India, to set up a developmental administration, not only at the central government but in the state governments also. So any preoccupation, any excessive kind of preoccupation, any excessive attention to I would not use the word attention. I think it's not a correct word. Any excessive, kind of importance you give, undue importance you give, even to small bits of deviant behavior, that will take the country, that will not be good for the country. So we must try and build the country and have the big picture in mind. And that is what he accepts that. He thinks that it might have been at the back of mind of the political leaders at that time. But, then he talks about the Santhanam committee, which set up the CVC, the Chief Vigilance Commissioner, as a result of the Santhanam committee, which was constituted in 1960. And it's a very famous, every civil servant, all of us read about Santhanam committee, isn't it? You have also read. And then he talks about there was a demand for some amendment in Article 311, which protects the civil servants from unnecessary harassment, allegations of corruption and all that. That he thinks that he's not so much, he's actually in favor of amendment of 311, and he thinks that it should have been amended to some extent, because then the civil servants are completely insulated from any action. And then the last chapter is about, he says, if the fifth chapter, if there is a political will, there is a way ahead. And he talks about areas where political will is required, public order and security, widening our arc of corruption again, and he thinks that we should have inquisitorial system as it in Europe. I'm again not too sure, but I think it's like, having a public kind of inquiry, not having an official inquiry, but trying to inquire about what has happened if there is a complaint, trying to inquire from all other sources. Then he has recommended independent directorate of prosecution and an independent CBI, an autonomous CBI, and making, as I was telling you, making corruption prohibitively costly. Electoral reforms, right to property, menace of lobbying, and then how to correct the professional bodies. And he says we must have an honest MCI, Medical Council of India, UGC, University Grants Commission. All these professional bodies must also be above board, because they are they manage our most important endeavors of development, health, education. And then he supports PPP, but wants it to be overseen properly. And lastly, he talks about, in the 6th chapter of this beautiful book, he talks about strengthening of democracy. Strength of democracy lies in its institutions, and ensuring the integrity of institutions, governor, Lok Ayuks, Lokpal, higher judiciary, cabinet secretary, election commission, comptroller and auditor general of India, public service commissions, UPSC, IB, intelligence bureau, police reforms, administrative reforms commission, parliamentary democracy, etc., etc. And now we have, as you know, we have many more of these regulatory bodies, institutions. We have the Human Rights Commission, we have the National Green Tribunal, we have the Telecom Commission, we have the Competition Commission, we have SEBI, we used to have SEBI at that time, RBI. These are all institutions, regulatory institutions, public institutions which need to be strong. And if these institutions are strong, the governance will definitely improve. And in the second book, I am now coming to the end of this first part of my lecture, which is as visualized by late Madhav Godbole. His second book is India's Governance, an incisive commentary on some burning issues, where again in the part 1 is on secularism, and he is not so satisfied. He says, chasing a dream, secularism was meant to integrate us, but has torn us apart. And there are other essays, 9 essays under secularism written by him, which include some newspaper articles also. Then the second part is in this book, good governance must be a fundamental right. And he has written 5 essays in this. One of them is tinkering with civil services. Civil services not good, which means don't change laws, don't change rules. Then he wants the present Prime Minister's legacy should be to bring down arrears of court cases. In part 3, he talks about public life, a downhill journey, and there are 7 essays in that, and there is one on Kashmir. In Kashmir, we are in a tunnel with no light at the end. This is rediff.com 2016. And he's in another, he is praised the Prime Minister, present Prime Minister, is scrupulously honest and has more to say. Then he talks about how the 2G scams and Colgate scams show why we need a Lokpal and an autonomous CBI. Then there are other parts, and I think I'll cut it short, but it's again about corruption, police for New India, how the CBI can be saved. These are all essays. His economic reforms gone astray, 3 essays on that. One on demonetization. And then there is on national security. He calls it multi-dimensional national security problems, and 3 essays in that discussing internal and external security. These are the 2 books of late Madhav Godbole. I think I have taken a lot of time, but shows that how much concern he was about how much concern he had about good governance, how much concern he had about clean governance, how much concern he wanted an inclusive governance, and how much concern he had about things happening in this country which, according to him, were not good, were not the positive things. So he wanted everything to be positive, which is what a great civil servant like him felt. And that is why he is a legend as far as an administrator is concerned. Coming to J&K now, and you would be possibly more interested in this. The J&K governance has definitely, there are a lot of positives post 2020, post 2019, 2020. Then we had the COVID year 2020. But I'm not in the government now, so my knowledge is an outsider's knowledge, but we see it there, I live there. Digitalization and e-governance has been excellent. It may not have happened in the same way in many other states, like the way it has happened in J&K. And they often talk about the old system of Darbar-Mu having been now not there, have dispensed with the Darbar-Mu, and this they think, which was the 6 months, the government in 6 months in Srinagar, 6 months in Jammu. Now it had come from the Maharaja's time, and it was because the state had 2 distinct regions, and to be frank enough, it had a lot of integrating influence. For 6 months, the government would be in Srinagar. For 6 months, the government would be in Jammu. And Maharaja also used to do the same thing. And both the regions apparently liked it. And it suited the administration because in summer, the climate or weather was salubrious in Kashmir, and the Maharaja and his party used to be in Kashmir. Similarly, the post-independence, the political governments also would be in Srinagar for 6 months, and then they would shift to Jammu in 6 months. So people of Jammu would have access to the highest levels of government for 6 months in winter, and people of Srinagar, Kashmir, would have access to the government for 6 months. So it always had I have lived through it all my life, and it always had that integrating influence. The people of Jammu getting to know people of Kashmir, because in summer people of Jammu would come to Kashmir to meet the government, to have their cases sorted out in the secretariat. Similarly, lakhs of people of Kashmir would go to Jammu in winter to meet the politicians, to meet the ministers, to have their cases pursued in the secretariat. So there was a whole lot of integration also, the meeting of hearts and minds, I would call it. And secondly, it also generated business, at least in winter, for Jammu region, because the number of people of Kashmir who would come to Jammu in winter to escape cold and also to pursue their cases with the government was much larger, and therefore it was a source of good business. for the people in Jammu. Anyway, but now the e-office which has been implemented, the paperless office which has been implemented, because earlier on all the files used to move to Jammu or they would move to Srinagar, and this was being talked about all over the country, that why is the government going with in trucks, all the files are moving to Jammu in summer, in winter, and back again to Srinagar in summer. But as I said, although this was an undesirable part of it, which was, which required a lot of work, but the meeting of hearts and minds cannot be denied, and I have seen it myself. But now, anyway, that because of the e-office, the move is very limited. It's only the senior most officers which come to Jammu and senior most officers which go to Srinagar in summer. And it's e-files, paperless offices, everything is available online, so things are easy now. There is accountability has improved in the offices. There is biometric attendance. Now, it's compulsory. It must be there in here also. And it has almost been implemented in all over all the offices in J&K. And similarly, online services are available as far as land records are concerned. So people don't have to rush to or run to the land officials, the Patwari or the Girdawar or Tahsildar. That is what we call them there. You probably call them Lekhpal and other things here. But now that has, so many services, more than 150 public services or 200 public services are available online. That is something which is very good, and people are accessing. Barring the access is the constraint. The services are available, but access is the constraint, that everybody doesn't have an access to internet. Or you may have infrastructural problems, the systemic problems, which prevent you from accessing the services from in a part of the city where the internet connectivity is not good, and so on. So there are systemic issues, but it's there, it's available. One big thing which the government of Jammu and Kashmir is talking about is the investments, the new investments, as a result of abrogation of or diluting. It's actually, it's the Article 370, abrogation of Article 370 and 35A in 2019. This has cleared the way for industrial investments in a very big way. So the government says that about 50,000 crore of investments are in the pipeline, and some have already started coming. And it appears that over the next, till about 2030, about 10 lakh jobs will be created as a result of this. And under the ease of doing business, 200 clearances are available online. And many foreign businesses have shown interest, like MR, Lulu Group from Dubai. They would like to invest. So there is the climate for investment and the scope for investment has improved as a result of the constitutional changes post 2019. Another good thing that has happened was the electricity generation is being improved, is being augmented. It takes time, but unfortunately, for want of investments, we had not been able to, in the previous regimes, not been able to generate all the power that the potential exists there. We have a potential of 20,000 megawatts, all hydroelectric, rivers. But we had been able to mobilize about 4,000 megawatts. But now again, another 3,500 or 3,600 megawatts is in the pipeline, and very soon the projects will be completed, and we will have that much power. We will be basically doubling the power generation within the state. And there's a lot of good work being done in the transmission and distribution system. That is being strengthened and improved in Jammu and Kashmir. Smart meters have been installed in Jammu and Srinagar cities, and there's a target of 1 lakh smart meters which will be installed in the rest of the state. So the realization of revenue from electricity consumption will automatically increase. So this is again shows an improvement and a step in the right direction. Then we have there's a lot happening in the road sector. The tunnels are being made. There is the Nashri tunnel has reduced the distance by about 30-40 kilometers. It's near Batot. Then there is the Banhal tunnel, which is now you don't have to go to the old Banhal tunnel, which was at a height. Now the Banhal tunnel is about 8.75 kilometers, and Nashri is about 11 kilometers tunnel length. And the Nashri has done away with about 30-35 kilometers of difficult road, Patni Top and so on. And this tunnel, Banhal, has done away with the Jawahar tunnel. So the travelling time between Jammu and Srinagar has reduced from, even in a car, from about 8 hours or 8.5 hours, 9 hours to 5 hours. And this is a major improvement. In small taxis, cars, I myself have travelled recently, and it doesn't take more than 5 hours now. And apart from the tunnels, the road has also been improved. There's an expressway within the valley now, and there is an expressway from Udhampur, almost from Nashri tunnel to Jammu, but certainly from Udhampur to Jammu, and from Srinagar to Banhal tunnel. There is expressway. If you come to Kashmir, and you will find that the roads are beautiful. Similarly, Sonamarg, there is a tunnel being made. It's called the Z Mode tunnel, and another tunnel being made to Ladakh called Zojila tunnel, which will keep traffic to Ladakh round the year. Otherwise, at the moment, I mean, till most of the time, we have dealt with 6 months Ladakh, or 4-5 months. It remains suspended because of heavy snowfall, heavy snow in the Zojila, which used to be around. Then we had to go up to climb up to 9,000 feet or 10,000 feet, which was very difficult, or possibly more, 11,000 feet, I think, Zojila top. But now all these tunnels at huge cost are being made, which will ease things. So 1 lakh, I was reading in one of the state government, 1 lakh crore is being spent only in 1 year, or has been spent in 21-22, or 22-23 is being spent in the road sector, road, tunnels and bridges. Similarly, we expect the rail to touch Srinagar in December 2023. Now that will be a huge achievement, and you must have heard about a bridge, the highest rail bridge in the world, being constructed in between Jammu and Srinagar, between near Ramban, between Riyasi and Ramban. I have not seen that. It's quite away from the main road, but we have seen the pictures, the photos, and this is a fact. A very important part of a very important development that has taken place in the last few years is the Panchayat elections. And that we had a Panchayat Act. It's not correct to say that J&K never had a Panchayat Act. We had a Panchayat Act. We had a Panchayat Act, J&K Panchayat Act 1989, and it was one of the finest acts when it was first made, because we almost got it. I was working in the Rural Development Department those days. I was Special Secretary, although I was not dealing with the act. But it was borrowed from Karnataka government's act, and that was considered to be a model act at that time. And rest of the states in the country were trying to model their Panchayat Act on the pattern of Karnataka Act. And we also did the same. Our minister at that time went to Karnataka, went to Bangalore, stayed there for some time along with the officials, came back and made a very beautiful act. But unfortunately, we could not implement it, and particularly after the militancy, the elections could not be held for a very long time. Even post political governments, post 96, post 2002 elections, post 2008 elections, post 2014, then in between some elections were held, but that was only in limited certain areas, not in the valley. Now these elections have been held everywhere, and 23,000 panches and sarpanches have been elected. Then the block development councils have been elected. District development councils have been elected. So it's now like the rest of the country, elections. This is a three-tier local self-government, which has been grounded, put on ground in Jammu and Kashmir. Similarly, the urban local body elections have also been conducted after many, many years. So, and as a result of which, the funds that we were missing or losing from central government, which had to come to the panchayats for many years, and this was one of the kind of criticisms of the political governments, that because they are not having panchayat elections for one reason or the other, mainly the law and order reason, the security issues, we thought the government successively felt that when we have thousands of panchs, how to protect them. And the security was always thought to be, now that the security situation has improved on the ground, it was felt that panchayat elections can be conducted now, and panchayat elections were held over the last 2-3 years, and now it's all there. And this year, about 20,000 crore rupees have been earmarked for the district sector, which means this planning will be done at the district level for 20,000 crores, which is double of 12,000 crores last year. And the most of the planning will be done in these panchayats, blocks, and district development councils. So this is seen as a major decentralization of the developmental process in Jammu and Kashmir. Similarly, as a result of this removal of Article 335A, which was giving the state subject, which contained the state subject law, which protected the state government's state subject law, which was under the J&K's own constitution. Because of 35A, which was part of the Constitution of India, because of removal of that, now we don't have state subject. We have but domicile. So domicile certificates have been given to what had been denied to the West Pakistan refugees who had come from West Pakistan, not the occupied Kashmir. The occupied Kashmir people were already state subjects because that was considered to be part of J&K. But those who had come from Sialkot and Pakistan areas into Kashmir, into Jammu, particularly Jammu, because most of them came to Punjab and Delhi and so on, but some came to Jammu also. They were not being given state subject certificate because state subject was a law which had been actually passed, which was enacted by Maharaja in 1925 or 1927. At that time, there was condition within the state, and the demands had come from all sections of society, not just in Kashmir, that we must have a state subject. We must not allow people from Punjab, Dadan Punjab, Lahore, and our own Punjab, all these people to come and settle here. We are a small state. So the Maharaja Hari Singh had got this law of state subject in 1927, if I am right, either 1925, but I think 1927. So this had got carried in the new constitution of J&K that was made in 1956, the state subject law. And as a result of that, we had this law till it was repealed, and it had been supported. The government of India had supported that law through Article 35A in 1954. The Article 35A had been passed. Article 35A of the Constitution had been inserted in 1954 to support the Jammu and Kashmir's state subject law. But now, as a result of doing away with that, so many groups, West Pakistan refugees, Gorkhas, who had been settled there, who had been there for a very long time, Valmikis, now all these people have domicile certificates. So, in a way, this is supposed to be part of the inclusiveness. Now, it has become, this new situation is more inclusive. It's not exclusive, because these groups are enjoying the same rights as other people. A Mission Youth has been launched with a lot of schemes for the youth, for their employment, for their training. There are schemes like Hosla, Himayat, Mumkin, Parvaz, Umeed, Tejasvi, Sankalp, etc., etc. So women, part of the self-help groups, a lot of employment opportunities for women through the self-help groups. 2 smart city projects, one for Jammu and Srinagar, are being implemented at about 700 or 800 crore each. Then there is a proposal for a light metro rail within the Srinagar and Jammu. Tourism has been restored in a very big way. Last 2 years have seen massive footfall of tourism, and it's largely because of the law and order, the better peaceful conditions and better law and order, which has improved. There's no doubt about it. The number of militancy incidents has gone down, and uh, and it has tourism leads to employment generation, income generation on a very large scale. Attention is being paid to agriculture. Saffron is now being will be sold through NAFED, and high density apple is being encouraged because high density apple has more fruit per more crop per tree, and this is being encouraged. Forest Rights Act has been extended to give forest protection, to give forest rights to tribals. In our case, the tribals are the Gujars and Bakrwals in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Health sector is being expanded. Two aims are coming up, one in Jammu, one in Srinagar. The Jammu aims is almost near completion. In education, the IITs, there's an IIT in Jammu, there's an IIM Jammu. And again, health sector, medical colleges, new medical colleges have been set up. 7 medical colleges have been set up. There's a Medicity which is being planned, and when that happens, 1,000 MBBS graduates can be, 1,000 MBBS seats will be created. And but in the for the people immediately, 45 gold cards have been issued, and there is a massive satisfaction under this Ayushman Bharat Sehat program, health program. So there is a great deal of satisfaction because the treatment is provided free of cost, isn't it, Mr. Sundar? You know it better, but because I'm not in the government, but I hear it, and it's a very popular, very people are very happy about the gold card, the golden card, or the gold card, gold card. So it's very popular. It's very popular. In education, 50 new degree colleges have been set up, and the national new education policy 2020 is being implemented. School education also, a lot of things are happening. We had two calendars for board exams, one for winter session, which was in December. The exams used to be held in December before the winter, and the March, which was for the rest of the Jammu division. Now it has been decided that let us follow the national calendar and have exams, the board exams of 10th and 12th. So a whole lot of things. The very wonderful thing about back to village. A lot of these senior, because we don't have MLAs and all that. Now it's been 4 years. We've not had democratically elected government. Any state would like to have a democratic elected government. So there is a people are kind of wanting a democratically elected government. They want elections. They want the statehood also. But in the meantime, what the government did, it is periodically sending officers to villages and to stay there for a day or two to meet the people. And this keeps on moving from one set of villages, one area to another area. Senior officers, commissioner secretaries, principal secretaries, they have been assigned certain areas, so they are all the time focused. Okay, these are the problems of these areas, so they bring those problems to the secretariat, to the officers, then follow them up. And this is some kind of an arrangement we have in the absence of MLAs and all other representative people. So back to village is very popular. Mr. Sanjay Nahar must have heard about it. Back to village. You should cover it actually someday. You should go and go with these officers and see how this back to village is functioning. There is a Lieutenant Governor's grievance portal. I believe it's also doing very well. Thousands of grievances are being sent, and they are being monitored also through a system called RAS. It stands for something. मैं भूल गया हूँ. मुझे याद था मगर भूल गया हूँ. Then the lot of work going under the Jal Jeevan mission. Tap water everyone is being provided tap water. Lot of work. I believe I have got feedback that from in the villages that tap connections are being given on a very large scale, including to Anganwadi centers, to schools, and so on. So this is good. My concluding remarks would be that J&K sometimes, I hope I have not given this impression, there has been great improvement over the last 4-5 years or 3-4 years, there have been so many positives. But it's not that there were no positives earlier. It's not that. Let me say that particularly, let's say if 1990 is a watershed in the sense that the militancy came in, but 96 is I would say 1990 is not a watershed. It's a start of an unfortunate phase when the militancy started. But 96 is a watershed, first watershed, when we had the elections. The first time we had elections after 6 years, and a government, democratically elected government, was put in place, and it has huge, contrary to the expectations. The turnout of the electorate was very large. It was just around 60%, which was not expected at that time, considering what had happened for about 6 years from 90 to 96. So then the political governments came into action, and they did a lot of work. The 96, headed by Dr. Farooq Abdullah, the National Conference government till 2002. Then Mr. Mufti Muhammad Saeed came in, heading the government, the ex-Home Minister of India, 2002 to 2008. Then Umar Abdullah took over in 2008 to 2014. Then again Mufti Saeed took over in 2014, 2015 in coalition with the BJP. There was a BJP PDP government from 2014, end of 2014, 2015, March 2015 to June 2018, for 3 years nearly. So a lot of work was done. It's not that there was no work done, and that sometimes seems to be the impression which people carry from outside the state. But I can assure you that a lot of good work was also done during these, and a lot of restoration, revival, moving towards normalcy. Even militancy was fought, terrorism was fought, and J&K police had done extremely well. Even it continues to do extremely well as far as the anti-terrorist and anti-militancy operations are concerned. It's SOG, the Special Operations Group. Then there was another thing that people think that sometimes an impression is given that perhaps things were not adequately happening in Jammu and Ladakh, because there were 3 regions. It was a wonderful state, Jammu, Ladakh, and Kashmir. But every time, any time when people have tried to look into it, and even officially, that is there discrimination? Most of the time, it was found that there was no discrimination. The regional balance was always, every political government was trying to maintain the regional balance. There would be, everybody will not agree with this. Sometimes they will point out, in Kashmir there was the road network was larger, because Kashmir is plain. Jammu is hilly. It was mountainous partly. Ladakh was very mountainous. So in certain cases there would be differences, but generally the per capita expenditure in Ladakh was highest, even during the political governments. And when Ladakh got its Autonomous Hill Development Council in 95, when there was president's rule, governor's rule, it was given more powers during the political governments, both after 96 when we had the National Conference government, and then even after when Mr. Mufti Saeed took over and subsequent regimes. Every time they asked for more powers, the Autonomous Hill Development Council of Ladakh, they were given. Now they are a UT, of course. You might be knowing that in post-2019 developments, it's a UT. It's, now there is, that issue is gone. But there was a great deal of understanding among regions, and we worked very nicely with each other. We had good relations with each other. As I was telling you, this Darbar Mu used to also create a meeting of hearts and minds. But anyway, it's still there. People are still going from one region to another because of business, because of education, and because of so many things. So things will move on. I mean, we are not saying that we should look back, that we should again have a Darbar Mu, but we have to move on now, and things are moving in a positive direction. Then about J&K administration, when I was also in the government, and we had the president's rule in 1986. Mr. Jagmohan was the governor. And I remember the day the uh, power was transferred to the representatives to an elected government, Mr. Jagmohan in his speech said that J&K administration is second to none in the country. And I was also part of that administration at that time. I remember him. I remember these words. He's no longer alive, but I clearly remember November 1986 when the political government took over from him after 6 months of governor's rule. We also had single line administration. Mr. Sanjay Nahar may have heard about it. We had, even before Sheikh Saab had got it, the district level, Sheikh Mohammed Abdullah, the district level planning had become part of us in 1976-77, and it worked very well. Of course, we did not have the panchayats all the time, so the feedback from the ground was not so much, but still the MLAs, the members of the district development boards, all of them were preparing district plans like the way DDC is preparing the plans now, the district development councils, which are elected. Now, that is the credit we give to the post-2019 development, that we have had panchayat elections, we have had block elections, we have had district elections, and all these people coming together are making these plans at the district level. That is why the allocation has increased. Now more money is being given to these district level people for them, because now they are elected. So therefore, it can be easily said that we have decentralized the planning process and handed over funds to the representatives of the people or to the people, and they are doing things themselves. Lastly, I would say that I have concluded my lecture, and I think there is hope, and we must. People do expect soon democratically elected government elections and statehood and all that. I think that is in Jammu as well as in Kashmir. People want to get back to democracy, and one of the very important issues which I would request, the important, all of you to, not important, all of you to understand and empathize with that the environment and the natural environment and ecology, the natural resources of Jammu and Kashmir make it a very unique state. The natural beauty of Kashmir makes it the paradise has called. That is what forced people to call it the paradise on earth. Our lakes, our rivers, our streams, our mountains, our forests, our landscape, that needs to be preserved. And development must therefore be, in my view, largely subservient to environmental protection, particularly in our state, in the valley. And I'm happy that the government does realize it. There are environmental laws, sometimes, because of compulsion, because of developmental compulsion, or because of other compulsions, because it's a border state. But my feeling is that if J&K does not retain its natural beauty, Jammu also has great beauty. It has mountains, it has rivers, Chenab is flowing through it. Then it has, a lot of mountainous regions. Its Punch, Rajouri is very picturesque. Doda, Kishtwar, again picturesque. Then certain hills of beyond Kathua, Basoli. Then there is a connection between Doda and Kathua, which is a big road. Mr. Azad used to be very particular about that road. I am forgetting the name of that road. Banni Basoli Road. And all this, they need to be protected. The natural beauty of Jammu and Kashmir, I am not only talking about Kashmir, natural beauty of Jammu and Kashmir, natural resources need to be protected in order to, because this is the USP. This is what brings in tourists in very large number to, and we cannot have climate change. Recently I was speaking in a university there. If everybody will have climate change, it's a global warming. We cannot escape that in Kashmir. But we can reduce the impact of that by protecting our own resources there, by protecting our water bodies, by protecting our lakes, rivers, and our mountains, our forest. And we can plant more so that our carbon storage, carbon sequestering carbon, that is a technical word, that is when the carbon is consumed, absorbed by water and by trees. As a result of what all of you would know, that if we have more trees, we'll have less carbon dioxide in the air. And that is what we want in Kashmir. We want clean air, less pollution. And yesterday I was reading a statement by a very senior doctor, the director of the SKIMS. He said about 10,000 people or more are dying of pollution. In I think it's a bigger number. I'm forgetting the number. I think 60,000 people are dying every year as a result of pollution in the state, in the whole state. So there is a lot of dust pollution, particularly because of the construction activities. There's a whole lot of dust in the air. You might think that Kashmir has very clean air. It has. In winter, it has very clean air because there is much less construction activity. But when there is construction activity, there's a lot of dust, particularly in Srinagar city and around it. Anyway, thank you very much. I would leave you on this point that we need to ensure that the beauty of Jammu and Kashmir, the natural beauty of Jammu and Kashmir, the lakes and environmental, the environment is protected, the natural environment is protected in Jammu and Kashmir, to continue it to be a beautiful state and a beautiful state of this country. Thank you very much.